Hello, folks, and welcome to History's Devils. It's a podcast journey through the lives of murderers, charlatans, psychopaths, and shitheels. And we are into part 2 of our exploration of Vincent Kennedy McMahon and Donald John Trump. Jayne, friend, is joining me once again. Jayne, how do we feel? How do we feel about these two men at this juncture?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think this is turning into an epic. And I think having exposed a lot of the particularly sleazy stuff in their early careers, I'm not feeling endeared to them.
No, funny that.
Yeah, but also I think I'm becoming more fascinated as to the connection between the politics and the wrestling, because I think, coming back to, we're making a thesis here. I think it's very persuasive, and hopefully will reveal some more examples in this episode.
Reveal all, yes. We are building our argument with evidence.
Yeah,
which apparently is the scholarly method. Yeah. Apparently that's what you're meant to do. In this post-truth world, there's still room for this stuff. Apparently, let's see how we go with this. So we left our hero. No, that's the wrong word. We left Trump. Let's just call him Trump.
Protagonist.
Protagonist. There you go.
There we go.
Antagonist. We left Trump coming down the golden escalator, as I mentioned, at Trump Tower to announce his presidency. And this entrance was not unlike that of a wrestling superstar, choreographed. This wasn't the only pro wrestling aspect to this performance, though. This is something that doesn't get reflected on enough. I think that one of the first things Trump said after coming down the escalator, he then gets on this podium that's been set up in the foyer of Trump Tower to announce this grand thing. He says, "Hey, this is some large group of people, yeah? Thousands of you. And this is bullshit, right? Absolute bullshit."
Where have we heard this before with the thousands?
Exactly, yeah. The thousands and the tens of thousands, the hundreds of thousands. There were, in fact, I think about maybe between 30, maybe 50 people tops who had turned up. Most of them journalists who were looking for a fluff story, because again, this is context is everything here. This is 2015. This is a reality TV star deciding he wants to become president.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned Jesse the Body Ventura in the last episode. He was, pro wrestling guy who pivoted to politics in his native state, Minnesota, and he becomes governor in 1999, I think.
Mm-hmm.
That same year, Hulk Hogan starts going on talk shows saying, "Yeah, I'm going to run for president." And there's this very funny moment. I forget. I think it's on Jay Leno, because he was always tight with Jay Leno.
Yeah.
And I think Leno asks him, "So which party are you going to run for? Are you a Republican or a Democrat?" And Hogan's like, "Well, I'm somewhere in between." Just blagging it, like, doesn't, it's just, again, it's pro wrestling, it's gimmick. Hulk Hogan, as we know, as an aside, goes on to become big MAGA guy. And one of the last public appearances he made before his death last year. Was it last year or was it this year? It was last year.
It was last year.
It was last year, yeah. Was at the Trump's whatever event it was. I forget which event it was now.
I can't remember.
It might have been his inauguration. I can't remember. But anyway, he turns up and he does the whole gimmick. And he rips his shirt off and he's got a MAGA shirt underneath and all this. And it was revolting.
I was so disappointed as a Hulkster fan. I was like, oh no.
I always knew that guy was I mean, again, he could be an episode in and of himself. There's a lot of skeletons in Hulk Hogan's closet. But as I say, never a fan. And the person, Terry Bollea, not a particularly nice guy either. No. But anyway, let's not speak ill of the dead. Let's focus on those who are still with us. And Donald J. Trump, as mentioned, is the guy who is going to come out and present himself in a fully gimmicked way as a potential Republican nominee for the presidency. And these journalists are there to get this story, which they think is going to be a bit of fun. And this is the thing about Donald Trump, that people still fall into this trap to this day, where they underestimate the man. Mm-hmm. They look at the absurdity of him and they go, well, obviously he doesn't mean what he says. And it's like, no, if this man says he's going to do something, believe he's going to try it at least, and he may well accomplish it. And this is the danger with Trump always. And this was that first sign, I think, despite the ridiculousness of this scene, we know where it goes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something that I mentioned in the last episode, but it bears repeating, that is full Vince McMahon stuff. The perception is reality. Trump claims that there's more people at this event than there were. That sets the tone for the presidency, just as Vince McMahon claimed there were 93,000 people at WrestleMania 3, when in fact there were 75,000. It's about projecting a greater level of success and prosperity and popularity than you have. And we all remember in the first presidency, the crowd sizes were an obsession for him.
Yeah.
He had all of his staff lying routinely about how many people attended his rallies, how many people attended the inauguration. This was something that was much talked about, and it seems quaint now by comparison to the sort of stuff he's said since. But this was something that really caught a lot of people's attention. It's like, how we have photos of how many people were at this thing. Like how can he just say that's not there? We can see there aren't those people there. But he swears, absolutely no, there were hundreds of thousands of people.
I think he's at the point, well, clearly he's at the point where he can't tell the difference, or he doesn't want to admit the difference between, in a theatrical context, if you are lying about the success of your performance, or, how many people are attending your event, it doesn't really matter. And that's, to some degree, it's expected. Now, is he so clever that he's just taken that out of the wrestling world, out of the theatrical world, and he's applying it to politics? Or is he that stupid that he's going, I'll just tell people there's 20,000 people when there's actually 50, and it doesn't matter?
That's the line he walks. It's somewhere between those two, and we'll get into that, the psychology of that and the kind of alternate reality that he's created. But that alternate reality, that starts when he comes down the escalator. That's the start of something, and it's gone on into the second term. As we're recording this, we are in the midst of the bombing of Iran. God knows where we'll be with that by the time this actually drops. But in the last 48 hours, we have completely wiped out their missile defenses. And the initial strikes on Iran last year, I think it was, we completely wiped out their nuclear capabilities. The economy is the greatest thing ever, when it's demonstrably anything but. Facts and figures belie that. And the thing about this is, yes, all politicians lie. And this is lying. It's world-class lying, but it's not just lying. Like, this is what people get wrong about Trump. It's not just lying. It's inflations of success that in some case are the absolute opposite of the objective reality. That has been the key to his political image from day one. Up is down, black is white. It's about distorting perceptions. And for lifelong wrestling fans like myself, this performance at Trump Tower was the first indication that this presidential run was going to mimic a lot of the stuff we saw at WrestleMania 23, and it was in effect going to be like watching a wrestler run for office, right?
Yeah. And I think what strikes me about everything up until this point, he is larger than life, obviously, but his whole modus operandi is just to say, right, I'm going to do the biggest thing, and that is a part of inflating the figures and inflating his success. I'm going to put the biggest, boldest, most ridiculous idea out there. If someone stops me, okay, then we'll deal with it, right? If someone challenges me and says, actually, you're lying, then we'll deal with it, and we'll work backwards. But if no one challenges me, we'll just run with that lie, and we'll run with that inflation of figures, right?
We'll work backwards, and we'll perhaps suggest that it never happened. That's the other thing. Sometimes it works like that. But you're right, that it is key. It is a key cycle of the way Trump operates, is that you do the biggest, brashest, boldest thing possible, and then if you can get away with it, great. If not, you change tack, usually in the form of a strategic retreat. But this is all part, as I said in the first episode, of wrestling psychology, which I think Trump learned not just as a pro wrestling fan when he was younger, but during his interactions at various WrestleManias, his work at WrestleMania 23 in particular. You can tell that he's had conversations with Vince McMahon about this. You can tell that he's absorbed through osmosis a lot of that experience and how wrestlers work and how that that fake universe they exist in functions. Before we get into this, though, we do need, I think, for folks who are not wrestling geeks like myself, to define some terminology, right? Because you flag this, that, you know, as someone who has a peripheral knowledge of wrestling, you know some of these things, but then the actual ins and outs of them don't. Wrestling has its own language. So what are some of the things we need to define before we go forward?
Yeah. So, well, I don't know. I think you can be really helpful to me, particularly here. So, yeah, I've picked up a lot of wrestling knowledge through osmosis over time. So, we have this idea of having a gimmick. So, what's a gimmick? Give us some examples.
So, a gimmick is yeah, as I said in the last episode, if it's successful, it's usually an inflated version of your own personality. Mm-hmm. What comes with the gimmick, though, is it's not just presentation. So I mentioned that Trump has the long ties, the fake hair, the overcoat, the suits cut a certain way. I mean, Vladimir Zelensky has a gimmick. You know, since the war, he was in his sort of the green jumper, the fatigues, and then he's pivoted in part because of that awkward exchange at the White House to this sort of military style coat which passes for a suit. You know, he's another guy who again, he comes from the world of showbiz. He's understood from day one his role as president of Ukraine. Part of it is sort of projecting a gimmick of defiance, and he's done it incredibly well. So it's not like Trump has a monopoly on this. But one thing that I think is unique about Trump's gimmick is, and this is where the pro wrestling thing comes in, is that the larger than life personality boasts. One of his most infamous is that he said he could stand in the middle of Fifth Avenue and shoot someone and he wouldn't lose any voters, which is that thing of projecting overconfidence, projecting strength, projecting power. You know, only the most powerful person on earth could do that. And another thing that's really big about his gimmick is that he never loses. This is absolutely fundamental to the personality, because again, it's not just presentation, it's personality. To this day, he claims he never lost the 2020 election, even though he did. He will die claiming that he never lost the 2020 election. Even the people around him who went to bat for him because they had to, a lot of them have kind of eased back and gone, well, yeah, he probably didn't, you know, win. He will never, ever admit that he lost the 2020 election, because Donald Trump pathologically has to be a winner. He has to win, because that is a big part of the image, the gimmick he has projected to his supporters from the start, is that if you back me, I'm the winner. And everyone loves a winner, right? Everyone loves a winner. Some, you know, more terminology, jobbers, right? Jobbers are the people who always lose in wrestling. The people who never win the titles, never become the big stars. No one cheers for them. No one wants to cheer a jobber, but they'll cheer the guy with the belt. Trump, a big part of his gimmick has always been, going right back to The Apprentices, he's the guy in the big chair giving the orders. He's the winner. Everyone else, he is the sun around which everyone else revolves.
And for him, even typically in wrestling, even if someone is winning and they're the bad guy, people still cheer. So he's working entirely on that premise, isn't he? He's learned that. He's picked that, lifted that out and gone, it works in that scenario. Yeah. So why not?
Yeah. It doesn't matter if you're a bad guy or a good guy, as long as the crowd is supporting you and behind you, you're winning. So that's him. Yeah.
So then in the context of Trump, of course, how is he promoting himself? What's his promo shtick?
So a promo is a wrestling term that applies to the verbal exchange between wrestlers, usually when they're building up to a match. So to cut a promo on someone is to lambast them, to run them down, to say, I'm going to beat you, whatever it is. Now, again, watching Trump's run for the Republican nomination initially as a wrestling fan, he did something that no one had ever done. You know, this is meant to be, you know, respectable debates where you get up and he just got up and cut wrestling promos on people, you know, and a big part of promos is, you know, you come up with these little nicknames for your enemies. And Trump, you know, Ron DeSantis becomes Meatball Ron. Chris Christie, sloppy Chris Christie, you know, making fun of the fact that he's overweight. Jeb Bush is low energy Jeb. These days, he's still doing, you know, Gavin Newsom is Governor Newscum. He was calling Justin Trudeau, you know, Governor Trudeau for a while when he was doing that whole thing about Canada's going to become a state of the US. Elizabeth Warren, Pocahontas, racial.
Oh, wow.
So, and well, this is the thing. Like a lot of these attacks, a lot of these nicknames, and Sleepy Joe Biden, that's the infamous one. Like he's attacking people's its race, its physical appearance, its mental acuity. These are the kind of base level attack lines that pro wrestlers use in their exchanges. Stone Cold Steve Austin and The Rock back in the day, Rock could call Stone Cold, bald headed son of a bitch, and Austin, Fred and opener kind of whoop ass on you. And I will lay the smack down and all this, it's snappy, aggressive sayings that are used. And Trump from day one was using this, and no one knew how to come back to it. To this day, people struggle with it because, again, we're talking about politics, which in theory it's meant to be civilized, adult debate. What Trump did by injecting, and it's not to say it wasn't already there. There was already, you already had some people who had gone a bit off-piste in the way they discussed. But what he did was he lowered the tone so much. He took the policy out of politics and he turned it into promos.
Yeah.
And that's what it is today. You see Pete Hegseth getting up and trying to sell people on Iran. What was it he said the other day? He was like, the new Ayatollah has come in. We believe he's injured and disfigured. It's not just a graphic chest beating, we have not just defeated him and taken the belt, but we beat him and we took his woman. It's that sort of that's wrestling. That's wrestling.
It's that childish approach, and it is childish. It's what you would aim at like an adolescent audience, which clearly is wrestling.
But it works. But it works because we live in the age of the soundbite, right? And this is something that some politicians have got. Others, to be honest, I just don't seem to get. And I think just to get off track a little bit here, but politics writ large now is in this period where it's having to adjust to the era of the soundbite, the snappy promo, that pro wrestling ethos is right through politics. And I don't think that's going to change. I think the way we consume media these days is that politicians are going to have to adapt or die. And arguably Trump is the guy who is going to, when the historians look back at this, however many years in the future, they're going to conclude that Trump is the guy who really alters that paradigm. And reduces it to this.
I think it's embracing social media, isn't it? But not only that, it's like the TikTok generation of kind of
short attention spans.
And that's all people are going to remember is that little catchphrase, right?
And when you've got when there's not a lot of room to discuss things, or when you're reducing the room to discuss things, or when you're reducing things to promos, that also means that you can say stuff without any kind of critique. Because you just say the thing and move on. So, Hulkamania's running wild, right? Hulk Hogan was still saying that phrase right up until the day he died. It's like, no, dude, Hulkamania died a long time ago. There's no one's into you anymore. But he would still say that phrase. And it's just like when Trump gets up and says, America's running wild. He basically says America's running wild. We're more successful than ever. The economy, it's Hulkamania's running wild. You say the thing, you cut the promo, you move on to the next promo. And there's no room for any debate or critique. Yeah. And that the frantic pace at which Trump has deployed wrestling promos as a form of not just self-promotion, but policy making has completely caught everyone off guard. Like no one, journalists, Democratic politicians, whoever, no one seems to be able to keep up with it. Gavin Newsom's probably made the most valiant attempt, but even then it comes off a little bit hackney-eyed. But anyway, it's not policy, it's promos. That's the point there.
Yeah. And so then to that end, I think there's another term as well that we should clarify, because I think this is highly relevant. So a shoot. What do you mean by shoot? So
there's two things. There's two modes of wrestling. There's one that's the work and the shoot.
Yeah.
Shoot basically means this is real. Mm-hmm. Okay. If you say something's for a shoot, it means it's real. An example of that would be, I'm just trying to think in terms of wrestling. If in the course of a match, someone legitimately gets injured, right? A move goes wrong. Because I mean, the thing we have to remember about wrestling is, it's fake in as much as the outcome of the matches are determined, but the physical moves they're doing are incredibly dangerous. And there's been many occasions where people get injured because a move goes wrong. And in that instance, we move from a work to a shoot. The guy's
Mm-hmm.
broken his leg, for example. You
Mm-hmm.
can't continue the match. So all of a sudden, what you're seeing on camera changes. The referee will make a signal, a stretcher will come out, and the match is going to have to change, and the whole storyline is going to have to change, right? That's a shoot.
Mm-hmm.
A work is what happens when it goes well. A work is when a wrestler goes through their, probably the best way to explain it is a wrestler goes through their sequence of moves, and there'll be signature moves. You know, Hulk Hogan had the body slam and the leg drop. When you saw that, you knew that's the end of the match. When he body slams Andre the Giant at WrestleMania 3, he's going to then drop a leg on his throat, and that's the 1, 2, 3 pin. You know that. You're conditioned as wrestling fans. That's the work. Obviously, if Andre the Giant wanted to kick out of that pinfall, he could have, because he's Andre the Giant. He weighs 500 pounds, and Hulk Hogan dropping his leg over his throat isn't going to do anything to him. But
I don't know. He had a bad back by that point.
He did have a bad back by that point, but still, I mean, the point is that, you know, worked move, a lot of wrestling moves, I said before, a lot of them can hurt, but if they're worked well, they don't hurt. Yeah. And that's the art of wrestling, is making it look real without actually hurting someone. And what Trump understands working very well. You can't be a gimmick without working the crowd, without getting in your hits. In lieu of moves, he's got recognizable turns of phrase, you know, that he's deployed at rallies forever. Lock her up. Make America great again is probably his greatest sort of worked phrase. Phrases that he can just say and people will cheer. Those are his moves. Those are his moves. And he doesn't do rallies today for a variety of reasons, I think. But back in the first term, he would do political rallies every other week, usually just to keep working, just to keep the crowd invested in his performance as much as anything else. And it was always the greatest hits, you know, make America great again, call opponents' names, talk about Mexican gangs, talk about they're eating the dogs, left-wing radicals like Joe Biden, lock her up, as mentioned. You know, it was on repeat for a long time, the greatest hits. Just as if you watch enough wrestling matches, and it could be Hulk Hogan, could be anyone, eventually you go, okay, well, he's done that move and I know what's going to come next. You know, stuff gets repetitive because it's wrestling matches are as staged as Trump's performances to the public. And the thing is that, and this is something that I think needs to be said, that the misnomer about wrestling fans is that they think it's real. All right, this is, again, for the people who are like, whoa, wrestling fans are morons. Wrestling fans have known that what they're watching is simulated combat since probably the 1920s, right? They know they're being worked. But they buy into it because they want to be entertained. It's just like when you watch a film, you know Tom Cruise isn't really leaping from that explosion. Right?
I think he is, though.
Well, I know if it's Tom Cruise, it probably is. That's a bad example. I don't know. You know, any normal sane actor is not leaping from that explosion. Exactly. All right. Exactly. And they are not really shooting that person dead. But you suspend your disbelief. Because you want to be entertained. And that's the art of the work.
It is. So this brings us on nicely to this idea of kayfabe, which for me is the most interesting part. As coming to wrestling later in my life, I was like, really? I don't understand why this is a thing. So can you tell us what that is?
So kayfabe is both the most interesting sort of terminology within wrestling, the most esoteric, and I think the most important for understanding how Trump works. Kayfabe is Carny speak. A lot of these terms come from the carnivals because that's where wrestling started. It all comes out of Carny, and the best guess is no one really knows for certain, but it probably comes out of a Carny speak for keep it fake. That's the prevailing assumption. And when a wrestler refers to kayfabe, it's the art of maintaining the alternative reality in which they operate. Okay. You can't work a crowd without creating the alternative reality, which says that when you come out with the belt, you are a champion. Because obviously no one's a champion of anything. The belt is a prop, right? You haven't won anything. It's a prop. But you project to the crowd through kayfabe that, no, if I come out with the belt, that means I am a champion, just like a boxing champion who's actually earned that belt through fighting is a boxing champion, or, you know, the people who win the Premier League hold up the cup, whatever, you know, that sort of thing. So that's one art of it. It's the art, kayfabe is the art of blending the real, the fact that wrestlers, as mentioned, do get injured, and it is a physical job they do, with the unreal, the fact that no one can take 10 straight punches to the face, Because this is a big spot in wrestling. This is a move that happens a lot. You get someone in the corner and the crowd counts along. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It's usually the good guy pounding in the face. If that were real, the guy would be maybe dead, given the size of the people thumping him. If not, he'd be battered, he'd be bruised, he'd be bleeding, his eye would be swelled up. But no, instead, that same guy who's taken 10 punches to the face will then, 30 seconds later will be suplexing the guy who was punching him. And that's not real. When you're watching it, it's not real. But kayfabe dictates that you accept that alternate reality. And this, as I say, has been absolutely central to Trump's operation. You have to create that reality in order to thrive in it. And this is where alternative facts come in. Now, most people will remember that phrase from Trump 1, the first reign of Donald Trump. It's the same as the wrestling fact, which is that if you throw someone into the ropes, they're going to bounce off the ropes and run back at you. Yeah. Right? Physics, no, that's not going to happen. If someone throws you in the ropes, you can just go, you know what, I'm just going to stop running. Yeah. But in the wrestling world, no, the second you throw someone in the ropes, they have to run back at you to receive a move, right? That's an alternative fact in the wrestling world. Just as Trump has an alternative fact about crowd sizes, about the outcome of the 2020 election, all these kind of things. And right now, what we're dealing with in Trump 2 is a different alternative reality where Trump is a changing gimmick, where he is now a warrior president, right? This is the new reality we're in, is that in Trump 1, he was no wars, right? That was the thing. And the alternative reality was that America is going to become more isolationist. It's going to basically move itself away from any sort of international engagement, and we're going to focus on making America great again. The new alternative reality is that America is in the part of a second Monroe Doctrine, or a Trump Road Doctrine. I think it's really clumsy. But I think Hegseth has used that term, the Trump Road Doctrine.
It's another soundbite, isn't it? It's
a promo. It's a catchphrase. Yeah. And just for people who don't know, the Monroe Doctrine describes America's policy of basically trying to control the Western Hemisphere back in the 1800s. And so what's happening here is that Trump is kind of reshaping the reality, which is that, well, I said I wasn't a war president. That was my promise to you, the voters. But actually, no, what we're doing now is war. And I'm a warrior. And this is despite the fact, and just the other day, actually, this was fascinating. He put up a picture, and this shows that, he's clearly responding to criticisms of this turn, because he's put up a picture of himself, I think, at military college, which he attended, which is not military school. Like he was never in the military. Infamously, this man was a draft dodger, right? But he put up a picture of himself in like this uniform with his parents and was like, proudly military or whatever. And that's because he's shaping the facts to suit a new narrative. The new narrative is the new fake, the new kayfabe is that Trump is a warrior president leading a warrior nation in a time of war, which is the exact opposite to the reality he created in the first Trump reign, which was that we are putting blue-collar workers again, their jobs back. We are making America great again. That rhetoric has completely died away. And that's because the kayfabe reality of Trump world has changed.
I think we've seen recently some really shocking and really sickening examples of where we have that I'm a warrior president and I'm going to seamlessly blend reality with video game footage. So we have these little videos that are put out of, particularly with the torpedoing of the Iranian ship, where we've got footage which is then kind of cut with fake
action films,
like video game footage, right?
Call of Duty or something,
like Call of Duty or whatever, with with bigger explosions. And yes, there's blurring the lines, but that is just, for me, is just sickening, and it's obviously playing into a very specific audience.
Yeah. And again, that's material that, because that's being put out on like the White House's official social media. That's the sort of stuff that wouldn't have happened in the first term. And that's because the kayfabe world he was creating was very different. And I think that the most egregious form of kayfabe, to my mind, in Trump world is how they have kayfabed, to use the verb of the term, which again is used in wrestling, how they have completely kayfabed what happened on January 6th, the insurrection. That has been twisted from being an anti-democratic riot and an attempt to sort of seize power into an act of patriotism by the people who they've been described as patriots who are actually standing up for the Constitution and all this stuff, when it's the exact opposite. And that's because in Trump world, to be patriotic is to be loyal to Trump, right? That's the alternative reality. And the way that MAGA works is that, and there's been some good research on this, on the psychology of MAGA folks and how they actually interpret Trump. And a lot of them have admitted that they know that a lot of what he's saying isn't true. But they're along for the ride anyway. They're along for the ride. They are suspending their disbelief. And it could be because one of the things they think is true, and this is another way in which kayfabe is really essential, is that when you're watching wrestling, for example, as I say, the 10 punches in the corner, that ain't hurting anyone. And that the two people in the ring are cooperating with each other to give you a performance of simulated combat. However, and this is particularly true today with the internet, and there's a lot of sort of backstage websites that talk about, the backstage machinations of wrestling. However, if you know that in real life, those two people, not their gimmicks, but those two people portraying those gimmicks, if they don't like each other personally, then you will buy into it more because there's a hint of reality in there. And that's how Trump works his fans, works his supporters. He will get up, he will do the greatest hits. He will say, offhandedly, January 6th, great patriots, with a wink and a smile. And they will know from footage. It's like, no, this was a riot. This was, and police officers died, and this was bad. But they will go along with it because somewhere later on in the speech, Trump will say, and I hate immigrants. And the person listening might hate immigrants. So they'll buy into that bit of truth, and they will suspend their disbelief about the non-truth, and that will carry them along. That's how kayfabe works. It's blending the two and being able to pick and choose that which you want to believe in, and that which you know is untrue, and that which you think might be real. Trump is a master at creating that gray zone. He does this in the way he projects himself into an international audience as well. One line he always repeats is, and this has been particularly true in these conflicts, press reporters are like, well, so what's going to happen next? And he's like, well, just wait and see. Stay tuned for the next part of the show, because it is all a show, right?
Yeah,
and that's
completely.
That's a form of that's something Vince McMahon would do. Like it's kayfabing reality. It's going, no, the reality is that people are dying and there's a war going on, and we'd like to know what your plans are. And he's like, well, you just have to wait and see, because trust in the storyline that I'm giving you, trust in the non-reality.
I struggle to understand the psychology, and I think a lot of people would, of saying, well, I'm going to suspend my disbelief of 99% of this stuff, but there's one thing I want to hear, and that is what I will never understand the psychology there.
What Trump has done as well is that he has taken that traditional baseline level of, well, all politicians lie about stuff, they obfuscate. And instead he's done this thing where he's gone, well, I'm just going to lie about basically everything. And I'm going to create a completely alternative universe. And within that, just like you do in wrestling, and within that, people can buy into the stuff they want to buy into, and they can ignore the stuff that they know is bullshit. And that, to your point about, asking the question, how does that psychology work? Well, I think it's because what Trump understands is that people will hear what they want to hear. They will cheer who they want to cheer, just like in wrestling. They will support whatever gimmick they buy into. And Trump's used that knowledge to create this world where, and you mentioned this before, it doesn't really matter what he says. He knows it doesn't matter what he says. Yeah. Because people will still either believe or they won't believe, but they're along for the ride. It is like terrifying to think about it, but that's kind of where he's gotten us to by creating this kayfabe world. He's got it to a place where you have to basically question everything you're seeing, just like you do when you attend a wrestling event. You have to question everything. And if you want to sit there and be critical and question everything, go, well, this is clearly nonsense. There's no way that guy could lift up a 400-pound man by himself and slam him through a table and then that man get up. That seems ridiculous to me. Or you can just go along for the ride and be entertained. And that's what Trump banks on, is that people will go along for the ride and be entertained. And the sad thing is, that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people.
Unfortunately. And I think also, coming back to wrestling specifically, there's still an appetite, and now a growing appetite for, we've got to create the biggest pop, right? There's got to be that moment.
Which is a crowd response. Yeah.
Yes, that's another key term to define. But people almost expect that. So when you have a match that there isn't anything like that, and it's just, it plays out and there's no pop, people are sort of disappointed. And that is translating to Trump, absolutely, because the timing of what he does, as you say, like, what he says doesn't matter, but the timing of it
pops the crowd.
Yeah. And that's the important thing here, isn't it?
And to take that analogy further, let's use Keir Starmer as an example of a straight politician, right? He's a wrestling match that no one's cheering. He's a wrestling match that no one's invested in. He can talk, and people are like, yeah, well, I'm watching this guy talk.
Yeah.
Where's the excitement? Where's the catchphrases? Where's the pop? Trump is doing the exact opposite. He is giving you new content. Every day.
Exactly.
He's giving you, and when I say cheer for, just to break that down a bit more, I'm not just talking about the people who are fans of Trump. There is an entire ecosystem of Trump critics that exist today, and they will deny this till they're blue in the face, but they're lying too. They love that he creates chaos. They love it because it gives them something to latch onto. His critics are addicted to the Trump show just as much as his fans at this point. And that's precisely how he wants it. And it's the same dynamic in wrestling. Either you're there to boo the heel or cheer the babyface, doesn't matter. So long as you're tuning into the show, that's all the promoter cares about. And Trump is the promoter, performer, everything.
This is not everybody, but some people would say, even his critics are like, well, I don't like what he's doing, but he's shaking things up. So
yes, that old chestnut.
Yeah, it's uncomfortable, but he's kind of, at least he's shaking things up, which is never a good thing.
So let's move on, and in fact, we'll move into sort of closing this up actually, but just seeing where we are now with Trump and wrestling and where that sits. Something which I think ties this in a bow neatly is that, I mentioned this before, that Trump throughout his career has found people of use to him, discarded them, found gimmicks or approaches or careers that have been useful for him, discarded them. Not so with Vince McMahon and the world of WWE. Trump is as tied to them today as he ever has been. In January 2024, Vince McMahon faced allegations of sex trafficking from a former employee, a woman by the name of Janelle Grant, with whom he had an extramarital affair. It's the subject of an ongoing lawsuit, and Trump apparently has voiced support for McMahon, and apparently took several long phone calls with Vince, like as a friend would, giving him support, giving him advice, probably advice on how to get out of a lawsuit like this. I don't know. So Trump's, I know it's icky. It's icky.
It's so uncomfortable because it just speaks of like, if you're in the, you're in the boys club. So
completely. And but it's consistent, isn't it? This goes back to the 80s. This is what we were talking about in the last episode. So that's one connection that's still there. Vince and Trump are still great mates. Trump has not been taken out of the Hall of Fame. There's been some protests amongst the wrestling community to have him taken out because of particularly his conduct in his second term, but that has not happened, and I doubt it will. Vince McMahon's wife, Linda McMahon, who I haven't mentioned so far, but she is a staunch Republican. She was part of Trump's cabinet in Trump 1, and she is back again in Trump 2, having given massive donations, several $1 million to the Trump campaign. She is Secretary for Education, which is hilarious because Linda McMahon is not someone with an education background at all, but she basically, So we have a member of the McMahon family who is part of the Trump cabinet. WWE is unambiguously a MAGA company. It's a MAGA-aligned company. I mentioned before that in the last episode that WWE is currently owned by an umbrella corporation called TKO Holdings, which also owns UFC. The head of UFC, Dana White, is a an avowed Trump fan, very outspoken Trump supporter. As part of the festivities for the 250th anniversary of the American War of Independence, Trump is going to hold a UFC fight on the White House lawn, and they just announced the card the other day, which, as a UFC fan, I'm looking at it and going, that's not very impressive, but whatever, doesn't matter. Point is, again, pro wrestling. It's not pro wrestling, but it's pro wrestling adjacent. He is going to put UFC, hyper masculine, tough guy sport.
Yeah, it's
projecting again the warrior. We're doing warrior Trump now, so it's going to be UFC on the White House lawn because that's the spirit of America. That's what the founding fathers wanted, Jayne.
They did, really. Right? They wanted crass, tacky entertainment.
They were into it.
They wanted shirtless guys beating themselves up, right?
Yeah. Outside the White House. That's, again, I refer to the Biff Tannen's casino being circled by bikers in Back to the Future 2. This is what we're dealing with. Yeah. But again, that's very closely aligned because it's all, again, TKO, Trump, WWE, UFC. They're all part of the same, happy treehouse. And the current guy in charge of WWE, Vince McMahon's son-in-law, a former professional wrestler by the name of Paul Levesque, goes by the gimmick name of Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, massive man in a suit.
Giant man
in a suit. He is now running WWE since Vince had to bail out because of the sex allegations, the Janelle Grant case. He is very close to Trump. There's been pictures of him and his family in the White House, in the Oval Office. Trump has been cited. He's talked about Triple H and how he admires him as a businessman, stuff like that. Trump has also appeared in the lead up to the election, the most recent election that he won. He appeared on the podcast run by a pro wrestling alumni, a legendary figure, The Undertaker, a real name Mark Calloway, who is a lifelong Republican, big Trump supporter, had him on his podcast. And again, this was something that, to go back to my previous point about how politics has changed, this was derided by liberals and the Democrats. How crass he's gone on this podcast. That podcast, I think, had about 6 million views, something like that. Just as Trump went on Joe Rogan again, it's all in the same atmosphere, and people derided that. It's like, no, this works. This gets people. And as part of that podcast, Trump actually did a photo shoot with The Undertaker and another pro wrestler who has become a Republican politician, a man by the name of Glenn Jacobs, who went under the wrestling moniker of Kane. And him and The Undertaker were kayfabe brothers on television. And Trump did this photo shoot with them, and he said, we're this is the tag team you want to get behind, basically, to lead America. And this, again, to further explore this weird connection between pro wrestling and politics. This was in response to the fact that Dave Bautista, who I mentioned in the previous episode, who's gone on to become an actor, he was a former WWE champion. He is a staunch Democrat, and he actually released a video basically appealing to, for want of a better term, the manosphere. Because Dave Bautista is a big, jacked, manly guy, and he, riddled with tattoos, everything. And he posted this video saying, "Hey guys, look, Trump's a loser. He's a weakling. Real men, aren't draft dodgers. Real men aren't this, and all this stuff." And this was the riposte from The Undertaker and Kane. So you've got this, wrestlers involved in politics, and Trump weaponizing that. And it sounds absurd, and objectively it is absurd, but it is reality. He won that election. I'm not saying he won that election because he went on The Undertaker's podcast, but I don't think it hurt him one jot. In fact, I'm pretty sure it helped him.
Well, they say that no publicity is bad publicity. Sometimes that's not true, but yeah, I think in this case, yeah. And it's honestly, it's just about engagement at this point, isn't it? And getting some of these really well respected names, these characters that people know and love, to come out there and support him. But do you think this is going to have a negative impact on WWE or not? Is it the same crowd?
So there's a bit of backlash at the minute within the wrestling community about the connections between, because everyone's always known that Vince and Trump have been mates, but the connection between the WWE now and Trump and TKO has really become very unambiguous. To the extent that actually John Cena, legendary wrestler, had his retirement match in December, I think it was, last year. And there were rumors that Trump was going to turn up to that. He didn't in the end, But there was a big sort of a groundswell of saying Trump's going to turn up for this because it's a big wrestling event, Madison Square Garden, all this stuff. So yeah, those ties have been criticized by some wrestling fans. Wrestling fans, politics of wrestling fans is interesting. There are Republican, but there's a lot of liberal wrestling fans, and I think again, a lot of them just shut that out and just go, you know what, I just want to be entertained. The politics of this, I'm going to ignore because I don't think there's many wrestling fans who look at Vince McMahon and go, yeah, he's a good guy. I think we all know he's a bad person.
Yeah.
Who's done some wicked things. But again, people still enjoy listening to the Smiths, even if they don't like Morrissey's politics. One thing I do want to end on, though, which I think is important to note, and I'm going to put two photos up here. One is of Trump's presidential photo in his first reign, and the other is of Trump's presidential photo in his second reign. Mm-hmm. Now, I remember this distinctly. It was flying to the US and doing customs clearance in Dublin. And U.S. Customs TSA clearance, and they have the portrait of the president up. Mm-hmm. And I've been in the line looking at this portrait, these two different portraits on two different occasions, and it's striking because that first portrait, he's smiling, he looks kind of healthy, he looks normal, he looks like a president, right? Yeah. And that's because in that first reign, he was a baby face. He was baby facing. It was, I'm going to make America great again. I am going to repair all the damage. I'm going to drain the swamp. Remember that?
Yes.
I'm going to, the economy's going to be better than ever. I'm going to be for America. That second portrait, and again, he's the guy who decides how these portraits are going to look. He decided for his second reign, we're doing a gimmick change. Now we have heel Trump. We have this is the face of revenge right there. Mm-hmm. This is revenge for everyone who thought I lost the election. Revenge for everyone who voted for Biden. Revenge against everyone who derided me and mocked me in my first term. This is warrior Trump. That's the gimmick we're doing now. And I think it's an appropriate thing to end on is that, to my point, I said it in the first episode, and I hope I've proved my point here. This man is pro wrestling. And the only way you're going to understand Donald Trump and the way he has reshaped American politics, the way he has hollowed out the party of Lincoln and made it the party of Trump, is to understand that what you're watching is pro wrestling, and you're watching a pro wrestler in the White House.
Well, to this end, can I ask you a final question?
Sure. Let's try to end on a positive note if possible.
I don't know. It depends how you spin this, right?
All right. Okay. Let's try.
So in a parallel universe, is there a Vince McMahon who's out there doing politics? He is the president.
That's an interesting question, because Vince McMahon is an incredibly ambitious person, and he's had a lot of outside ventures. All of them notably have failed. He did a bodybuilding federation back in the 90s that was terrible.
But the steroids thing happened, and he was like, "Yeah, that's a terrible idea."
I don't think it would have been successful either, regardless of that. And then the XFL, his alternative to the NFL, his unwoke version of the NFL, it went down like a lead balloon. One thing he has kind of stayed out of is politics, to be honest. Like he's given money to the Republican Party on occasion, but I think Vince kind of knows his lane, and enjoys that lane. That said, in a hypothetical world, we have President Vince McMahon. I think we'd have a lot of similar stuff. We'd have a gimmick. We'd have outrageous press conferences. We would have sound bites. We would have promos being cut on people. It would be a wild ride. But, and this goes back to what I was saying in the first episode about how some people have testified to the fact that Vince McMahon is a more polite version of Trump. I do think we would have a more restrained, we'd have a wildly eccentric guy in the White House who in terms of, dignity and conduct doesn't befit the office. Yeah. But I do think he'd be perhaps a bit more restrained and more conventional in some respects. There are some differences between Trump and McMahon. I think in terms of, not necessarily in terms of the God complex. I think they've both got a bit of that. But Vince is perhaps a more cautious character in some respects. Does seem to have a capacity for some form of introspection, which is a quality that Trump doesn't seem to possess. No. And I think, it would be interesting. As I say, it'd be a wild ride, but I do think it would perhaps be a little more peaceful, perhaps a little more focused on making money, and perhaps a little less focused on, starting wars as it is right now. Maybe, I don't know. It's one. If there's any wrestling fans watching, comment on that. What do you reckon of Vince presidency would look like? Because it's a really interesting hypothetical, and given where we are now, and I said before, Vince intends to live forever. Maybe this is not a hypothetical. Maybe we get President Vince before we're done, because that's where we are right now with politics. Anything is possible.
And on that note,
thank you all for being with us on this 2 episodes. We kept it to 2 episodes, very restrained of us. Do keep liking, subscribing, and following History's Devils on the Apple, the Spotify, watch us on the YouTube, wherever you can. And we will see you next time for another edition of History's Devils.